During the announcements,
Are we having fun yet? Can everybody hear me? Okay, first question, I asked this of my independence group last month. I did this same thing over there. How many people have made a cryptic box? One. I got about the same results over there. How many people know what a cryptic box is? Hey, I got more of them here. Good deal. Okay, well, for those of you that don't know, a cryptic box is basically like if you ever saw the, what was that? Da Vinci Code. They had a puzzle box that they were trying to find the code for, and the whole idea is you've got two stationary rings and a series of movable rings. The movable rings you index and you either number, which I did for my grandson, or you can letter like I did for my other grandson, and it really becomes harder. Unless you've got a stepson like mine who's in the FBI and he guessed it first guess, so what can you say? Anyway, this one here, I made this one. This one has two stationary rings and 5 movable rings, and the code on it is Doxy. My wife likes dachshunds, and we have 2, so she likes Doxy, and if you get it lined up just right, you can actually open and close this. Come back here. It's got to be just perfect. Voila, got it closed. Move it around, and then somebody has to know what the combination is to get it open. It's only one time. That's one of the things you got to know when you start your puzzle box. You want to know how many live rings that you're going to have. However, whatever your code's going to be, whether it be, well, like my stepson had, he's a Redskins fan, so his was Redskins. So that was, I believe, 7 or 8 movable rings, which made 9 total rings that I had to make. Because at that time, there's several different ways to make the tubes. You have a wooden tube, which at that time I was making the tube and then gluing it into the end piece. Well, this one here I made monolithic. It's all one solid piece here and one solid piece here. And I'll show you this here later. But you want to make it so that you've got at least an 1/8 to a 3/16 walls on it. Anything smaller than that, it's going to get pretty thin and pretty flimsy. Be hard to hold your pins in. This one here looks like it's about an 1/8 inch and about as thin as I'd want to go. But you'll notice this one's probably closer to 3/16 or a quarter, so hopefully it'll make up the difference. But anyway, there's the wood. For the last demo I did, I thought, well, let's try something different. So I decided to try some PVC. PVC works great. The only problem I had was the fact that if I used a 2-inch piece of pipe, put a 1.5-inch piece of pipe inside of it, it was too loose, like so. So what I found was I could take 1.25-inch couplings, put it together, and then ream it out to 1.5 inches after I glued it all together. And I used a 2-part epoxy to glue it all together. So there's PVC, there's wood. You can do it monolithically or like my first ones, and even this one here I made with wood. And for the tubes, I used a little bit cheaper wood, the poplar, and then I could use maple or some other richer wood for the rings and the 2 end pieces. It just gives you a lot of variables there to work with. So like I say, the first thing you want to do is figure out how long you want your piece. This one here I set up for 5. Most of these I set up for 5. which means I need 7 rings. So what I did was I went ahead and made my tubes, and for the tubes I took 5/8 of an inch for each ring that I wanted to make. 5/8 of an inch plus 2.5 inches for the end pieces, and then I added 2 inches just in case. I always like to add that just in case part. Got my tubes made, got them glued in my end pieces. I just faced it off, cut a small ring, and glued them in. With the wood, I used just regular tight bond glue. With the plastic, I use a 2-part epoxy. And as you can see, I've got this one all made up. I've also got the rings made up, and we're going to make some rings here in a minute. But this is what the rings will look like. You'll set it up so that it fits your piece, and then you want an 1/8 to 3/16 groove on the inside, and I'll pass this around so that you can see what it looks like. But you'll have that, and then once you get that all made, you'll cut a little notch in one end. That's for your locking pin to go through. Your locking pin actually works inside this notch that you made, this ring, and to open it, slides through the notch that you made in the one point. So if you want to pass that around there, Kent. Catch it? Okay. So let's go ahead and we'll set up here, and I'll make a ring just to show you how I do it. I know there's probably a million ways, like the old saying goes. You ask 5 woodworkers how to do something, you'll get 6 answers, at least. But we'll give this a shot here. And what I like to do is figure out how big I want to go, at least get a rough idea, because we'll size it as we go. That's what I like about the way that I do this. That'll get me close. Let's just use this. Take and clean this end off a little bit, make it a little easier to see. Now when I'm making my rings, the sides of them, when I'm cutting my rings, I always try to angle it in just a little bit so it makes kind of a V out of it. So that the only part that's touching actually is the outer ring of each ring, outer edge, this outer edge out here. Makes it a lot less drag on the rings and makes it easier to work. All right. Now what I do is I cheat a little bit and take the worst of it out, most of it out with Forstner bit. Makes it a little easier to work with, and then I'll clean it up with a negative rake scraper. Just need to go in about 5/8 of an inch, just a little more than the width of your Forstner bit, if you've already got it faced. That's better. I found when I was cutting the tubes with these Forstner bits, I would take and cut the inside of the first one. The outside I would take and make a gauge ring so that I could set it on to gauge the whole outside with as I cut the tube. That way it was good and clean all the way down, and I could get my rings all to fit properly. Okay, I think we can get a ring out of that. At this point, I'll lay this aside. And I'll take my negative Rex scraper. And I can get it roughed out to the ring that I've got cut there. See how we're doing here. Oh yeah, looking good. This is the part I don't get in any real big hurry about. And I got lucky. Okay, from here, what we want to do is we'll cut our notch for the locking pin. Like I say, you only want about 3/16 by about 3/16. Take an 1/8" rod just to make sure I'm big enough. Not quite there. Need just a little more. Perfect. Excuse me. From here, what I'll do is I'll set up on my T-square a 1/2 inch so that I get each one the same size. I come in here and make my mark at a 1/2 inch. That, okay. Like I say, I'll angle it in just a little towards the outside. Now you don't have to, but once I get it in just a little bit, I'll take and bevel off those corners. Take some of the bite out of it, because it will bite. Then I can go ahead and finish cutting it. Take a little piece of sandpaper and knock the rough edges off of it. I'm sorry?
On that whole ring, you've only got one exposed surface that really needs to have a nice finish, right?
Actually, yeah, the only surface will be the one on the outside. Now, of course, the smoother you have your tubes and stuff, the easier it'll work. Okay, now this one's ready. Fits perfect. This one's ready to have the notch cut in it. And over here,
How did you get the flat spot on?
the flat spot, the flat spot? Well, it was only 3-inch material, and I had 1 3/4 inches, so I had to leave just a little bit of flat on it.
I thought you were doing that for the numbers, for the lettering.
I'm sorry?
You weren't doing that for the lettering?
No, No, I'll show you the lettering here in a minute. Okay, so once I get it to that point, and I've got, in this case, I'm using this one here, and I just made what looks like a ring. This isn't actually a ring, this is one solid piece. I didn't have to cut it off since I made this one monolithic piece, and I was going to have to glue this on anyway. So here's the sizing rings I was telling you about that I make. That way, once I get it started, I can carry on and have the same size all the way down. Just kind of gives me a gauge to work with. Makes it a lot easier than trying to do it with a pair of calipers. And the same thing on the smaller one. I have a smaller one for it. Now this one here, I've already got all but 2 of them with the notches cut in them.
Hey, Mike,
Yes,
was this in the AAW magazine? I think it was, wasn't it?
it probably was, but I got it off of YouTube myself. Yeah, I took their ideas and made what worked for me. As you can see, I've got these all with the notches in them, and I'll show you how I make the notches. What I do is I'll take and set it in my drill press vise. I try to set it so that the grain is straight up and down, running this way. That way, when I take my little saw, and this is something else. I don't know how many of you have seen one of these. My mom gave me this probably 40 years ago, 50 years ago, and I finally found a use for it. And now that I figured it out, it comes in handy for a lot of things. But anyway, what I'll do here is I'll take and cut this down till it just hits that outer ring. And I want it about 3/16 to a quarter also. And I found that if I make the 2 outside cuts and cut 1 center, the rest of it breaks out pretty easy if you've got it set up where you're cutting with the grain.
What kind of wood are you using again, Mike?
This is poplar here. Okay, there's one. And you always want your rings. Your cutout ring, you always want it to the inside so that you're looking at a flat face on this outside. And voila. Now this one's ready to start working with. From this point, I would take, I would take these, my largest ring, and I'll set the rings on one at a time. What did I do with it? There it is. Set my rings on one at a time. You notice the two lines I've got drawn here, Now these are cut lines. I'll open this up and make a groove all the way down to within the half-inch first ring. That way, that gives it room for the pins to slide through. So let's go ahead and catch that while we're right here. Now I've got my slot made. In this piece, I draw a single line. This is my center line for my pins. So when I come through, just set it up on here, in fact. Sometimes I'll use a chuck, sometimes I'll use a glue block. They both work equally as well. Now I'll set that so that that's on top. Lock it into place. Now what I want to do is hold this in, hold this there, and that lets me drill my holes. I've already got 2 holes in it, so I'll go ahead and one more. Okay, those holes are drilled. Use an 1/8 inch drill bit. And I come down, hold it tight against the backside, come down and come just as close to that ring as I can get it. Set up on center line. Another ring. Everybody see okay, I hope? Okay, these are for the pins. Then you take and cut about 3/4 inch pins. I had some in here. There they are. 3/4 to an inch long. And you'll take and glue them all in. And you want them long. So that gets that set up.
Do the blocks need to go back on the same, because you drilled per each block?
Theoretically, if you measure them the same, they're going to come out the same, but I always try to keep them the same. That way I don't have any question.
Write numbers on them, or?
You can. I don't usually, but now this one I did yesterday.
You get your grain match if you put them on the same way.
I'm sorry?
Your grain match was if you put them back on the same way.
Yeah, you probably could. Now, the way that I do this, and I'm sure there's a million ways to do this, is I will take a sanding disc try to line up my rings. Try to line up my rings so that I can use that for my gauge for sanding my pins. There, now I've got them all lined up till I touched it again. Just very carefully. almost there. Got one ring I don't have quite big enough. So that's easy enough to fix. We go back and we cut it a little bigger. That ought to work better. Voila. It works. Okay, from here, what we want to do is we want to take and mark it. Get it set up so that we can index it. And I'll tell you what, I am very thankful to this man right here. He showed us how to make an indexing system for our lathe, and I have found 1,000,001 uses for it.
And it's free.
I'm sorry?
It's free.
And it's free. Exactly. Now what I do is I take a piece of cardboard, I line up my rings so that the slots are all in there, and then the cardboard will just slide down in between them. I got a smaller one. Okay, need to make it just a little smaller. I want it tight so that it doesn't go anywhere on me. Oh, one more thing I forgot to mention. If you want to sign your piece, what I do is I sign them before I put on the tube, like I did here. I don't know if you can see that or not.
Point it down. There you go. You got it now.
When you make a monolithic piece, unless you've got a branding iron, it's a little tough. So I just sign it on the side. But you got to get your name on there. Okay, from this point, okay, I find my center right here, just so I know where it's at. And as you can see, I'm a little off, so I'll take and loosen it some. Up a little too far. Perfect. Okay, now I want to take and mark on each side of the notch all the way down, all the way across all, in this case, 7 rings.
So again, Mike, I didn't get a good shot here, but you're using that, the piece right on the index is your gauge, right?
This is my gauge, correct.
Your pen is in the way. Okay.
Okay. Now, move it to the next one. Now that gives me everything I need to know right there. Now what I usually do is I will take a pencil and I will mark these just light enough I can erase it down the center so I don't have to look for it later. The 2 ends we won't mark again. All our marking will be on the others. From here I take it and just start marking it. Now this one here is 26 points for all the letters of the alphabet. I've got another one that I set up that I could do 9 numbers, well actually 10 numbers with 0, and use that for a numbering system, which I did for my grandson.
And how many indexes is that wheel?
This is a 26 index. Now like I say, all I'm doing is just the just the 5 in the center, because that's the ones that'll be my my code. And you don't have to mark it real strong, just kind of light. You're not going to be manhandling it that much. Does anybody know what you call a midget psychic that has escaped from the FBI? You originally was police, but my son's an FBI agent, so we had to change it. Anybody know? a midget psychic that escaped from the FBI. It's a small, medium at large. Boy, tough crowd tonight.
We're into our cryptic box.
Ordinarily, I'd quit, but I want to keep going until I get them all in here. Won't take me just a second. And once I get these all marked, I take my wood burner with a skew point on it, and I will take and burn each one of these lines so that I've got a permanent mark. Once I figure out what my code's going to be, then I can start lettering them. And the way I letter them is I put them back in the vise over there, and that way it holds it solid, and I can freehand marking it. I started out trying to do it with a stencil, and it didn't. I could do it freehand as good or better than the stencil, because I couldn't hold the stencil still either. My wife wonders how in the world I do this the way I shake. So, well, it's easy when you got something to rest your hand on. There, now I've got all of them set up. Now from here I can take it off. Pull my cardboard. I don't worry too much about it as long as I've got everything lined up here. They're basically all the same size, so I don't worry that much about it. But at this point, I'm ready to start pulling them, and I never glue this last ring on. I can glue my bottom ring, but I don't want this last ring on until I get everything lettered or numbered or however you're going to indicate it. Once you get everything numbered and lettered, the last thing you do is you'll glue this on with your notch in the center. From there, it's just a matter of putting it on, cutting your, forming your end pieces, which I've done there. Parting it off, sanding it down, and it's ready to go. Uh-huh.
How much clearance do you leave between the first ring and that cap and between the last ring and that top cap?
That's the reason that I always cut my rings in so that it forms kind of a V here. The only thing that touches is out here. I have very little drag that way. So I can put them down just almost as tight as I want to. I don't have to clamp it or anything. It just has to set on in there. And what I do is I'll put my glue in my ring. That way when I set it on, it pushes the glue out and doesn't let the glue get onto my other rings and glue them down. Everybody understand what I'm saying?
But if you put that top cap down too far, aren't you going to put too much friction on between the rings?
I've never had a problem with it.
Thank you.
Anybody else got a question? Boy, you guys are an easy crowd tonight.
Hey, did you do any kind of like a write-up at all?
Yeah, Kevin sent it out before the meeting.
Okay, good.
And I've got a few copies here if anybody doesn't get the internet or didn't get one. I've got a few copies of the steps that I used to put it together. There's probably 10 or 12 up here. Take them if you want them. Anybody else? Okay. I think that'll do me. Yes.
How many of those have you made so far?
Probably 12.
Wow, pretty good. Well, thank you. I think this has been truly something out of the ordinary. This has been another bowl or a goblet or a wood box. But thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay. It's announcement time. Oh, that's right. What is the challenge for next month? What are we going to do?
Some kind of a puzzle, I think.
Puzzle.
Whether it be a puzzle box, something like what I've got here, or some other type of a puzzle. I'm always in the market for a good puzzle.